am great. How are you?
I am absolutely fantastic. I was just going to share, I might get into it a little bit later, but it's such like a cozy feeling reading through your background and profile. So thank you.
Thank you.
Very
that's
important.
Probably true of all true Southern belles.
Yeah, it was a nice mix. I was scrolling through social media and I'm like, this seems a little strange now. This is a good perspective to keep around during the day.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. I think that's probably honestly something that I still struggle with. You know, my generation, we're not the social media generation. We were the ones to put a smile on it and keep your business at home. And I think your generation is put it all out there. So I think we're finding our way.
Which is good and bad sometimes. I mean, it's a little strange sometimes, but yeah, I would have thought that you were natural at social media. I was just going to say, it seems so friendly and interesting. Book clubs locally, like what are you not doing?
Well, now that's the teacher in me. You know what I mean? Like if you're talking books, we're all in. I love to read. I can talk to anybody about reading and writing and books. That's what I do for a living. But all that other stuff, I don't know. I can't. I struggle.
Wow. I would have thought completely different. I did not notice that at all. Mm-hmm. Anyways, why don't we tell people where to find you online to start, just so we don't hold that from them?
Well, I am Susan Gooch, and I am at susangooch.com, and I am the author of 2 novels. Can I share those?
Yeah, okay, please.
So my first novel is called The Carrington Affairs, and the second one is a companion novel. It's not like a sequel, but it's happening at the same time. It's called The Non-Negotiable. And the first book they're both set in my little town of Searcy, Arkansas, because I don't know how much you know about Southern towns, but we have lots of secrets. And the thing about secrets in a small town, if they love you, they keep it. They keep those secrets. Ooh. And if they don't, well, then everybody knows your secret. It ain't really a secret.
Uh-oh.
So in this book, it's the story of Bennett Carrington. He is the junior senator from Arkansas. He's being vetted for the vice presidency. And it comes out he has a love child that he doesn't know anything about. So he resigns in disgrace. 11 years later, he can run for governor in our little state if he can get his first wife, who he's divorced from now, and his second wife, who's the mother of the love child, to tell the story. Because pretty much everything got kept quiet. So that's book 1. Book 2 is the love child himself, Ben, and this beautiful Mensa level IQ girl from California that he falls in love with. And he wants to come home to Arkansas to live, and she wants to stay in Napa and run a gold style winery. And so what do you do when your dreams don't align with the person you love?
Uh-oh.
How do you make that work? So that's book 2. And I just finished 2 weeks ago, book 3. It's called the Dirty Birds Book Club.
I was just going to ask about that. I saw that on social media, and I saw the first book on your website, and then I saw there was a sequel, and then I heard that you're working on something new. So I'm like, I need to talk.
Yeah. The third book is, it's the story in this book, the first book that, I told you about small towns. Don't ever think that small towns are run by the mayor or any of those people. They are run by the rich old white women that are, or any kind of women, doesn't matter your race, that have the power, because they're the people, there's those matriarchs that hold the families together and the communities together. And in this book, her name is Edna Stone, and Edna is in her 80s, and she's lived a very interesting life. She's had 5 husbands, and she loves to read the way I like to read. So she starts a book club, and at each book club, she tells the story of each of her 5 husbands. So that is really interesting to me, because I think that's kind of interesting. And then, obviously I wrote the book, so I thought it was interesting. And then the other story is in book 1, we also find out about Jules, who is Taylor's best friend and the campaign manager for Bennett. And we get to find out about her life and her loves and how she tries to get her happy ever after. So it kind of wraps all 3 of those up. So the series of the Carrington series is wrapped up. What I'm doing now is inside the Dirty Birds Book Club, they read books every month. So now I am writing the short stories that go with that. So the readers can read their short stories and know what the book club's talking about.
Yeah, I saw that. So that's a local business there how do I say it? Searcy?
Oh, Searcy. It sounds
Sir?
like, did you ever watch Game of Thrones and there was Searcy on there?
A little bit. I
Well, it
didn't get
sounds just
into
like that. It looks like, now we know you're not from here if you call us Searcy, but if you call it Searcy, it looks like it's Searcy, just like that. Then we know you're local.
I knew it right away. I was going to say it like somebody out of town, and then right away I'm exposed. Yeah. But anyways, yeah. So I saw tons of book clubs and meetups, and that's why I was saying it looks like you're a natural on social media. It looks so exciting. Have you always been engaged with the local writing and reading community out there? When did you start doing that?
Well, my college degree was actually in writing, and I had anticipated going to law school. Instead, I went to labor and delivery. So I became a mom.
Yeah.
And that kind of changed the trajectory of my life. I thought that I was going to have this great career and I was going to go off and be this big lawyer. And my husband's a little bit older than I am. We met on a blind date at 16, and which my parents had no business letting me be on that date at 16 with him. Let me just tell you, I don't know what my mama was thinking. But, we got real lucky. We've been married 39 years. Most people don't get that. But we followed his career. And so I had 3 children, and I was a stay-at-home mom. And my middle son had severe learning disabilities, and I didn't know if he would get through school. And so I decided to certify and be a teacher in case he needed me to homeschool him. I wanted him taught by a certified teacher. Wow. And luckily, he got through school fine, but I found my first love, which is teaching. And because I had an English degree and a writing degree, it was just a natural fit for me to become an English teacher. And so that is what I did for 20-something years. I also ended up getting master's degrees in administration, gifted and talented, and reading. And I am a prolific reader. I read every day. And I wrote a lot when I was younger, when I was stay at home. When I started teaching, there's just not time. So it took me a long time to write the first book, mainly because I would write and then I'd go away from it for, 5 or 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
And then I kind of pick it back up. But, so when I finally finished the book, I knew I was ready to retire. And, but I do miss teaching. And one of the ways that I keep that up is I'm in a lot of book clubs. Like you said, I think I'm in 5. And,
wow.
So that feeds that for me. And also, y'all got to read this. My Instagram really helps that because I get to share the books that I love with people.
Yeah, it seems very active on there. You were also sharing other writers, so it seems like a very beautiful little community that you have going there, obviously in your community. So it's fantastic. Wow, what a great story for how you started teaching.
Yes, and I will tell you that I really believe that teaching is a calling. Just like, they say ministry is a calling, and even maybe being a doctor is a calling. Teaching's a calling because you can, without me even saying anything, you can think of a teacher, if you were in any kind of schooling, public or private, that teacher didn't like you, it wasn't a good experience, or they got onto you. You can tell me chapter and verse of that. Flip side, you can tell those people who made a difference in your life, that inspired you, made you want to learn, made you want to helped you find your path. I want to be that. I wanted to be that person. And I really so believe that everybody's a reader. You just haven't found your book if you don't like reading. And so part of my greatest love was to turn kids on to reading, because research tells us that when you read, you grow your IQ. And that's the thing. I mean, as long as you're breathing, you can pick up reading. And
it's a great saying. Wow.
It is. And so, even like, for example, my husband did not read. He had to read for work. He didn't want to read for pleasure. This was before COVID. He would never read. And so finally one day I said, if I find a book you really like, will you try to read it? We were going on vacation, and he hemmed and hawed, but he did. And so I knew he was going to love like a spy thriller, like a James Patterson kind of book. And, I found one, it wasn't by him because there's one. I found one, I knew his attention span was not going to go much about 200 pages. And if I went with these long, complicated novels, he would just quit. He just quit. So I
Yeah.
did. And it was like working out. I had to work him up to longer novels.
Yeah.
And so he got to where he became a huge Patterson fan, read all the time on boat planes, trains, wherever he read. Then when COVID hit and we all went to Zoom meetings, he didn't fly anymore. And he had kind of stopped reading, and he had never read what I would call romance or family drama till he read this one. And the first time he read through this book, he puts it down and he looks at me and he says, "Is that how women think?" And I said, "Yeah." And I've been married to this man about 35, 36 years at this point. And I said, "It sure is." And he goes, "Is that how you felt every time I wanted to pick up and do something new or do my life and you were just supposed to follow?" And I said, "Yeah, is exactly how I feel when he did that." And so I think, and what is interesting to me is he has got so many of his male friends to read this book. Now we're talking men in their 60s.
Yeah.
Have read this book.
Mm-hmm.
They are my biggest fans.
Yeah.
Because I think they're seeing a side of the world they've never seen. And that's what reading what you haven't read will do. For me, even when I read because my least favorite genre is fantasy. Don't come for me saying that.
Yeah.
Or science fiction. But when I read it grows my brain because I don't think that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. You mentioned actually the reason why I started this podcast, which is very interesting, exposing myself to other thoughts and things that I wouldn't run into. And when I was reading through your books, it's the same experience. It's completely different. I didn't know that was the insight of like the female insight that I was not understanding there, but it's completely refreshing. And I was like, wow, I'm always looking for that component to read throughout the day to give me that, kind of balance things out. And I'm like, wow, I feel very different today when reading this, So thank you very much for that.
Well,
I can see how they're your biggest fans, the people who need it tend to want it the most. Right. So, yeah.
But it's like I said, for me, reading and writing is a joy. I come upstairs. This is my office. And I had to kind of create what looked like my office when I was a teacher. I went into administration the last 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that you need a private place where you're safe and your thoughts can echo off the walls so that you can really hear them. And, if I couldn't, people that go to write and good for them, like go to, coffee shops or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I would just people watch. I wouldn't write a word.
Yeah, I do that all the time. Love it. Yeah.
And I'm a people watcher. I love to watch people. I like to make up stories about what these people are doing and what's happening in their lives. I mean, that to me is so much fun, but it's entertainment. And to get the stories out of my head onto paper, I need everybody else to shut up and let them talk. Difficult
to write a book just like by itself. If you have distractions and you're trying to make things, add up and make sense, that's pretty tough to do in public.
So do you write as well?
I got into shorter blogs. I write a lot for myself. It's difficult to pin a format that I've gotten interested in. I've found so much excitement in doing background research for these podcasts, and it's because that's private writing, right? So it's like trying to figure out, like, what can I talk about here? What's interesting to me, and what audience would connect that might not read this. So that's really been exciting. And public writing, it's after the podcast, I do a lot of work for trying to connect writers and professionals to their audiences, and using my writing skills there. I got into the short format for a little bit, and it's very useful. It's tough to find an audience there without changing my writing from what I find useful, though. So I found that quite difficult. But I've always been a writer. I was going to ask you, have you been reading and writing your whole life, or is this something that you picked up along the way?
Well, I am dyslexic. And
oh, really?
Yes. And so, but I got very lucky God really blessed me because he gave me a mother that was a reading specialist. And, I
Oh,
probably
wow.
learned how to teach from her. But you don't know what this is, but maybe there's some old people out there. But there's this thing used to be called a film strip. And you would put it
Okay.
on the wall, and it was just like watching a movie.
Yeah.
And you could make the fluency go faster. And so my mother, because I was a major tomboy, all I wanted to do was running. And in my age, you went outside
Yeah.
and played all day. You did not come inside.
Yeah.
And,
I was much
and
the same. Yeah.
so she would every Sunday for about 2 hours, and then several times throughout the week, she would read with me. She would make me work on fluency. She built sight words. She would make me read and then discuss what I was writing, make me write about it. All the things that we do now that research has told us, how to teach reading. She had that early knowledge. And I just remember, this is terrible. I was a huge reader. I loved nonfiction. I loved biographies and things like that. So that was my genre till about 8th grade. And in 8th grade, I read for the first time A Tale of Two Cities. And I got it. Like, I got bitten by the bug when the character is gnawing on his hand. He's so hungry. He's gnawing his finger. Like, to this day, if I'm starving, that image comes back to me. That is what good writing does. It never ends. It's always fresh. And I think from that point on, I became an avid reader. And of course, what I told you about your brain, even with we know it dyslexia, you retrain the brain. I can read so quickly, and I can write pretty quickly. And so these stories, my writing process is very different than most people's. I think the whole story through before I write it. Like, I will sit and think through that whole story from beginning to end, the whole book. I know what's going to happen. And then I sit down and I write it like it's a scene, like scene 1, scene 2, scene 3, scene 4, scene 5. And I know exactly. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't change. Sometimes things have to change, but I have the end in mind before I start, because how would I get where I was going if I didn't know where I was headed?
Interesting.
So that's how I write. And, I would say that it's been a little bit of a challenge because I'm working on these short stories as the companion piece.
Yeah.
And they're changing on me. Like, they're 10,000 words. You gotta, it's like poetry. You gotta say the most with the least. And so I find myself cutting out things that in novels, I probably don't have to cut out.
How many words are usually in a novel? I actually don't know that.
I think in a novel typically is above 70,000 words.
Oh,
and
wow.
So, it also depends. I don't think there's any cutoff. I think anything less than that would typically be a novella. And I think right now the world is in a very short attention span. We know that attention spans are shrinking from an educator point of view. When I first started teaching, we would try to work with 2 to 3 minute attention spans. You would do something for 2 to 3 minutes and you would change. Even if that meant stand up, touch your toes, step back down, you had to do something every 2 to 3 minutes. The last report that I read as an educator was 20 to 40 seconds. And that was because as a gifted and talented coordinator, we saw, do y'all have that there? Do you have AP placement?
We have that. Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the things that when I was leaving, because I was one of those coordinators for a long time, is that people were starting to use TikTok to teach AP.
Yeah.
Because their kids couldn't stay focused longer than that.
I was just going to say that is the exact time format of the short videos on TikTok and every platform right now.
And so that's what we were doing. We were encouraging our educators to create plethoras of TikToks and set kids up in groups around the room, take your phones out, because you're going to have them out anyway. I mean, let's just call it. If you're trying to teach without a kid in the phone, you're fighting a war you can't win. Okay?
Yeah.
Just surrender. So have them get their phone in a constructive way, put that TikTok on, have them write or discuss what they're doing, and then change groups. And then eventually in an hour, you may have taught 20 or 30 minutes, have them time to process and write 20 or 30 minutes, but they did it in such a quick that you didn't lose them.
Yeah, those short videos are fantastic. I absolutely love them. Get the best parts of a certain piece of content, and then they can watch the longer form content to really solidify that information. Wow, that has single-handedly taught me more than I was able to learn before. Because think of it, like halfway through a conversation is when something is said. There's some of those key points, and then the whole conversation is what you still need there. So it's really a fantastic thing. I'm not surprised at all that the attention spans are right there. It actually makes perfect sense with how our social media platforms are built now. So
Well, and I
interesting.
think too, I mean, even with my little grandkids, I would have never handed my kids a phone or an iPad. They didn't exist, but I wouldn't have used that at the dinner table. I mean,
Yeah.
you didn't talk on a phone at a dinner table. You talked to the people at the table.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist. I had lunch with two of my grandkids today. My elderly father, my sister, my daughter.
Mhm.
Two children were on phones. My father was watching a ball game. The rest of us, my sister would pop on her phone. I'd pop. I mean, it was like, why are we even out to dinner? We're not even talking to each other.
Yeah. It's everybody now. It's not even just the younger folks. It's just absolutely everybody. Somebody's got something online that they're doing, even if it's just sitting there with the phone in the hand. It's always there.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting observation. But yeah, I read online that you devour 150 books a year. So I was wondering if that was something that you were always doing. I'm like, wow, that is a very large number. You must love that form of entertainment.
I don't even consider it entertainment. I consider it breathing. I
Did you say breathing?
Mm-hmm. It's my breathing.
Wow.
It's you know how people that have to, and listen, you can tell by looking at me, it ain't me, but there are people that have to work out every day. Like my husband is a marathon runner. He lifts weights. He runs every day. Okay.
Wow.
And I feel like he's done enough for both of us. It's kind of a joint thing. That's my stick, and I'm sticking to it.
That's hilarious. I just thought that. That's funny.
But if he doesn't get to work out, his mood he's in a bad mood. He doesn't feel good. That's how I feel about reading. And it makes you a better person. And you got to be careful, like I said, not to just read the same things over and over and over again.
Yeah, so difficult.
For me, working in some really good nonfiction, something that's going to grow me as a person, to read that. And if you look at my roundups every 2 weeks, you'll see a very huge change between historical fiction. Like I said, I struggle to get fantasy in there.
Yeah, that's all right. But that's fantastic, though, mixing things up for people.
As a reading teacher, I mean, my kids, they had to do a bingo, and they had to mark how much, all these different kinds, and they had to get one. So I make myself every few months read one, whether I want to read it or not. It's like eating your vegetables. You got to do it.
Good for you. Good for you. I was just going to say it's eating the vegetables. Wow.
So I would even tell you that I cut back. I was very embarrassed last year. My goal was 200 books, and I didn't make it. I got to 178 books, but we sold our house that we'd been in for 25 years. Yeah. We bought a new house. We remodeled it, and I finished writing the Dirty Birds Book Club. Yeah. So between that, I just didn't get the last 22 books in. And I felt so disappointed in myself.
But that's so much. That's so much reading and writing. Holy moly.
I will also tell you that my favorite time to read is between about 2 and 5 in the morning.
Awesome.
It is no guilt time. No one needs me to, I'm not supposed to be working. I'm not supposed to be writing. There's no laundry to do. There's nobody needs to be taken somewhere. I don't have any guilt about reading from 2 to 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
I chose to, and I don't need that much sleep. So that's how that works out. Wow.
That is a very nice, that is the early morning sprinkler time is what I like to reference. That is just like it's such a beautiful feeling at that time for reading and thinking into work. I mean, that's probably when I feel most focused actually. And it's usually if I stay up past like a late night hour to work. Usually I'm pretty good with going to sleep at a decent time, but when I get past those hours and I just breeze right into the morning, and then it's sunlight next thing I realize.
Well, I will tell you that for me, it's the silent time of day. And it's where the words on the page can really speak to me. And I'm not like you. I'm not a late nighter. I think I've won the lottery if I get to be in my bed by 8 o'clock or 8:30. But if you're planning on getting up at 2 o'clock to read, you have to go to bed pretty early.
Yeah. Or else you're tired when you wake up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I learn a lot when I go through material quite quickly for some reason, which might be the same as a lot of people, or it might be very different. And it's not because I skim through content, but it's actually just because I put some pressure on myself to get through stuff. And then that's actually how I learn to write. That's the primary writing that I do is while I'm reading content. I actually write through what I'm listening. And it really helped me. There might be something about dyslexia there might not. I never looked into that, but I find it really difficult to track long topics and conversations unless I'm reading through. This has been a little easier because sometimes I have a couple notes here and I've done some research, but when I'm watching videos, it's a little tough to go through that. So anyways, kind of ties into the question I was going to ask you. I mean, it sounds like a beautiful family. Everybody's helping each other with reading and writing here. And if you want to talk about your background a little bit, I know you mentioned that you were an educator.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to go into that really quickly, because it sounds like it was such a big part of your life.
It was a huge part of my life.
Yeah.
Once I started teaching, I told you I went into literacy because that was just a natural fit for me.
Yeah.
And I loved I've created, because this is going to sound crazy to you when I'm fixing to say, but I am more naturally better at math than I was literacy because I was dyslexic. So when I started teaching writing, I wrote a formula for it because I realized that my students, especially those that were good at math, struggled the same way I did. So if you could give them because here's the thing, they wrote what they kids want to give the teacher what the teacher wants. A lot of times teachers don't know how to tell kids what they want, especially when they're asking them to write, because they think. And so what kids would do is they would write what they had to say. And when they didn't have enough words on the page, they'd just say it again. And if they still didn't have enough words, they'd say it again. And so how many times as a kid did you write almost the exact same thing 3 times? And
literally.
Yeah. So I created a thing. It was called the suitcase. And I had to, just like I told you that I talk about planning before I write, we have to pack for a trip. And I would tell them it doesn't do you any good to take snow skis to the beach. So you got to plan to what you're going to write. And so I would teach them, we would draw a little visual. It was like a box with a handle, and we would plan our trip. And I would bring in like a suitcase with a pair of jeans, 3 shirts, and some socks and underwear, which I had to be, real cool about that. But, and I would teach them that the jeans was the topic. You can wear the same jeans 3 days in a row. And so your topic, whatever it is, if it's a short story, beginning, middle, and end, the characters and the story is your genes. Or if it's it's nonfiction, it's the 3 things about that topic. And your shirt are those 3 different points, or the beginning, middle, and end. And then your socks and underwear is your figurative language, your color, your sound, your sights. It's the stuff that kind of pulls it all together.
Cool. That's a great way to explain that.
And then the handle of the suitcase it's like your shoes are going in different directions. So your introduction and your conclusion have got to begin and end in the same place. Out here to the world, into the topic, from the topic, back to the world. So it's like your shoes. They look the same, but they're going in different directions. And so I would teach kids to think that way. That's how I taught writing.
Yeah.
And then I would take really well-written pieces of literature and I would show them how it fit that over and over and over and over and over again.
Wow. That had to have stayed in their minds learning that.
Listen, I have taught thousands of kids here in this little town, and people still tell me all the time, oh my gosh, my kid says they can write in college because they had Miss Gooch. And it wasn't me. It's not me. I want to be clear about that. It's that it works and it was simple. And I didn't say, well, just be creative or just brainstorm. Because when you brainstorm, you'd think of 50 things to write about, but you didn't know how to put the 50 together.
Yeah. Wow. But wow, what a comprehensive explanation and tool there. Your background and experience, that must have helped to develop something like that. That I have never been taught writing and reading to that level with such a beautiful visual. That sounds like so much care went into it. Wow.
Well, and it was funny because we had I don't know how they do it in Canada, but we have, end of course exams. And a big part of that is writing. And our kids would blow the writing. And I mean, for me, the most, and I mean, whether you're a special ed student to a gifted student, because the base of it is the same. What elevates from maybe the bottom base, whatever you're writing, to a really well-developed piece comes into the word choice you use, the metaphors and similes, that figurative language, the colors. But I would teach kids, like my lowest level kid, I would teach them words like ruby instead of red, teal instead of green, or jade. Because what do you get? You get a vocabulary hit. So you can remember to spell them. You can spell that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can spell ruby even if I'm dyslexic or I can't remember. Now my GT kid, I'm teaching them to say turquoise or alabaster. So you pick your audience to teach that vocabulary to. But guess what? It still gets a hit. And then it became a numbers game because that test score had to give them points for doing these things that they were doing correctly.
Wow. What a great teacher. No wonder you were in that. Was that your whole career you were teaching?
I taught for 15 years. And then at the end of 15 years, I had gotten some of those master's degrees. And so I wanted to be a principal until I saw what principals had to do. And I didn't want to be a principal. So I ended up working at the district level. And I did lots of programs. And so I was able to really touch groups all the way across the district. So I got to work with English as a second language or other language students and impact their lives. And they're the ones that need this like the most because they're having to read and write in a foreign language, and it like everything they're having to do what English speakers do, but they're doing it in other languages.
Yeah, that tool could be so tremendously helpful right there. Wow.
So I helped them with that. Then I did gifted and talented students, which I find so fascinating. And that's a huge part. Like in this book, I use so much of my background from that in this book with my character who's a Mensa level IQ, because I think those students have a whole, just like children who have learning disabilities like my son. And then I have another child that's gifted. Every single kid at every different level has their own needs. And as educators, we have to find it and we have to fill it or they will not grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was really important to me. So I got to work on that. Then I worked with a group called Alternative Learning. Do y'all have that there? It's for people. I
haven't heard of that.
It's two groups really. It's number one, it could be behavioral driven. They may have had a lot of trauma and they struggle to perform or behave appropriately in a classroom. So they need an alternative setting to learn. Maybe smaller groups, individual education, whatever. Or it could be someone who's going through cancer treatment, someone who is having, especially at a high school level, who's having to put food on the table. There's a lot of food insecurity. So people they go out and they work. And so they go to school part-time. So it's finding again how to meet that need so that kid does not give up on their education and get an alternative route to graduation and to moving to the next level. I worked on that. Well, I did district testing and worked on that. So I had a lot of things the last 8 years, but my main focus and what I would still talk about to then, and I still talk about today, obviously, is getting kids to read and write.
Yeah, of course. Wow. It sounds like you were dealing with like the people who need it the most too. That sounds like such a fulfilling career. No wonder you went into writing afterwards and did you retire after and become a writer?
I did. It sounds terrible what I'm about to say, but my book is a little bit spicy. I don't know if you've caught on that yet.
Well, it sounded spicy when you were describing it. Spicy. Politics and romance
it's a little spicy. And so, I, being AP coordinator, being all the things I was mentioning, I was in the high schools and junior highs every day. I even taught a class of GT kids 4 days a week. So I did not want to be walking down the hall and some, 16-year-old boy going, Miss Gooch, I read your book last night. I just did not want to have to do that.
I was just going to ask you if you were to say that you wrote that in school, has anybody gone through? It's good that they're wanting to test their reading skills, but that would have been a little awkward.
Well, I did have a lot of students who knew that I was getting ready to retire and that I had just published a book. And especially like my sixth graders, eighth graders and that age, they all wanted to read my book. And so I was very hesitant to say not to do something because you tell a 14-year-old boy not to do something, you might as well give him the keys because he's going to do it.
They're going.
But what I did was I recorded myself telling them, boys and girls, this is not age appropriate for you. It is fine for your parents, because a lot of their parents had bought the book.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm thrilled that your parents are supporting me, but please, I'm asking you not to read this book. It's not appropriate at this time. And then I said that to the parents because I did not want to get sued for inappropriate material. And, honestly, my books are not anywhere near as spicy as most people's out there. It's just not. It's much more of a, like I allude to things, I don't have body parts, whatever. But here's the kicker.
Compared to what we see online some days, I mean, it's probably not even close to it. I don't know if, do you think that the kids at that age would even understand a lot of like the because writing can be a little difficult to understand anyway. So who knows if they do.
Here's what I would tell you about every sixth grade classroom that I ever taught in. And every single one of them, there was somebody in that classroom who still believed in Santa Claus. Okay. And there was somebody in that room who was already doing things that could get a baby that might need a Santa Claus.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I could just imagine the horror stories and the stories of teaching. And wow.
But I also think that, even though my book's not as spicy as, say, like all those other, and all the stuff their parents are watching on TV or whatever. Here's the deal. I was their teacher. We hold our teachers to higher standards. We kind of expect them to be a little bit better. Yeah,
true.
And especially if they liked me. And I didn't want to, I didn't want to disillusion anybody or upset anybody. And so part of that was just me saying, I'm going to turn this corner. It's my second act. I'm going to write these books. Yeah. And I'm very lucky because my husband is very supportive of that. And I wasn't old enough to actually retire in the state of Arkansas. So I had to go without any income for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And that's a big commitment. And so I was very grateful that my husband was willing to support that.
Yeah, I was surprised when you said you retired. I'm like, wow, you don't look like it at all. I'm like, where did that come from when I was reading that? So that's fantastic though, that you followed your dream, your passion right there. And it turned out so beautifully. And I'm just so curious. I'm so like, what is the word? Curious, interested. It's just how the story just ties in so perfectly with you becoming a writer. It just makes complete sense. And why would somebody want to read is because it's probably written in a way that's just perfect for every type of reader to get it and understand it. The readability of material is very important when it comes to choosing a writer. So I'd be very interested to see the writing style there. But yeah, thank you very much for letting me know. I mean, it sounds like a very, I think fulfilling is probably the right word there, but you described it best. But yeah, I mean, you talked about what led you to publish your first novel there. There's 3 novels in that series. Yes.
There... Now, the third one will not be out for a while, but the first 2 are out wherever good books are sold. Anywhere from Barnes and Noble through down to any local bookstore. You can get them to order it for you. Or you can get it, of course, from Amazon. But the third book, like I said, it ties it up and it lets me, I really love my small town. I'm sure you can tell I have that Southern accent. I'm a Southern girl. I just am. And I'm proud of that. But when I first moved to Arkansas, because I'm not originally from Arkansas, I'm from Tennessee. My husband we moved here from London, England. And I had 9 days to move here. I didn't know a soul in this town. And I fell in love with this town. I live in the best place in America. Bar none. And so I really wanted my book set here. We have an incredible community of schools, churches, universities. I mean, we are so lucky. It's very safe. And that was very important for me to set my book here. And Arkansas, I don't know how much you know about the state of Arkansas.
I actually don't know a lot about Arkansas. I was like quite taken back when I read Arkansas. I'm like, wow, I actually know nothing about this place. Let me ask about it because it sounds amazing. By the way you describe it.
Here's the one thing that everybody knows. Do you know Bill Clinton, former President Bill Clinton?
Yeah.
He is from Arkansas. And he's yes, he was from here. And of course, he is the golden child of Arkansas. But, Princess Diana loved to come to Arkansas because it's so beautiful. It's called the Natural State, and it's absolutely a gorgeous, gorgeous state. And she liked to come here before her death and could relax and kind of get away into the hills. We are the home of Walmart. And so the Walton family started here. And we have a incredible museum in Bentonville called Crystal Bridges that Alice Walton has put on. And it has, I went all over Europe to museums. It has that level of quality art there. And so she's really done a lot to bring that kind of culture to Arkansas. We have Tyson, which I don't know if you've heard of Tyson chicken. It's a big
yeah, actually, I have heard of it. Yeah.
That's here. Chicken is a huge industry here, as well as rice. We are one of the largest growers of rice for anybody in the world. And Arkansas is a really unique state. Mm-hmm. And the reason why it's so unique is that because we have one team. We don't have any like pro football, basketball, any of that. Okay. We have some like minor leagues. We don't have any major league. Everybody here is the University of Arkansas Razorbacks. Have you ever heard of the Razorbacks?
Never.
Oh my gosh. Now
I'm not allowed to say that. I redact that comment. I have heard about them. I'm just going to need you to fill in the details.
Okay. So they are, that is a big thing for Arkansas. We are all Razorback fans. In fact, we just won and last night at the NCAA basketball tournament. And, we have our own call, the Woos Pig Suey, where we call, we call the hogs. Yeah. And, here, because we don't have a lot, when people get behind something, they are 100% behind it. So when we have somebody go on American Idol or American's Got Talent or whatever, they win because the whole state gets behind you. Yeah. We are looking to support each other. I think that's really helped me as well because so many people have bought my book locally because I'm an Arkansas writer. Mm-hmm. And I think that we do have, our state has a lot of problems. There's no two ways about it, but anywhere you live in the world has problems. Yeah. But we live in a state that wants to be progressive, that wants to have good school systems, good job opportunities. We are I think, number 2 in the United States where people are moving into Arkansas than any other state.
Yeah, I could see that. It sounds so cozy and tight knit there. It sounds like a fantastic place. And I was actually gonna, because it ties into the cozy feeling that I got when reading a little bit about you. I was gonna say like the social media and this feeling, it must tie in perfectly with where you live because it feels a little. Like I've stumbled into a small town and gotten a beautiful little perspective when I read anything from you. So it really it comes through your writing. It's quite interesting.
Well, thank you. Well, I hope so. There used to be a show years ago. You probably don't even remember. It's called Mayberry. You've probably never heard of it.
No.
It's a very old show. You can look it up. It's black and white. But, and then there was another show later that was called, about Beaver Cleaverville. Beaver Cleaver these are 1950s shows, but there's something about those towns that my little town still has and Arkansas still has. Arkansas as a state still has. And like I said, not to say we don't have our issues because we have our issues. Do not doubt that we have our issues. Mm-hmm. But, it's just a really good place to grow up. In fact, we moved here twice. The first time was in 98, and then we were here 3 years and we left. We were transferred out, and we were able to come anywhere in the world, and I chose to come back here because I wanted to raise my kids here. And now all 3 of my kids have gone off to college. They've come back here. They've had their own children, and now they're raising their children in the same
wow. Wow. You mentioned you moved there. When did you guys move to Arkansas? Then?
We moved in 98. We were in London, England. We were there when Princess Diana actually died. Okay. In London, very traumatic to be there at that time. Yeah. But, we had lived in Dallas, we'd lived in Tennessee. We moved every couple of years and for my husband's job. And I just thought that would be my life forever. I moved every 2 to 3 years. I never saw myself living in a house for 25 years. And so that was like almost traumatic last year when we sold our house after 25 years. Wow. But, we moved a whole whopping 6 houses down on the same street.
Yeah. Wow, that speaks of the place then. Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm amazed when, because that's really not a focus that I get throughout the day. I hear very quick, I hear a lot of quick, attention span. We were talking about that. And that's just something I took from reading you is just, I almost feel like I'm in the town when I'm reading you, which is a very, very interesting experience. And, thank you for that, obviously. But but anyways, talking about kids and growing up,
Mhm.
I started reading and writing when I got out of school, and I feel like that's something that I would always want to share with children growing up. It's an amazing skill. What are some tools and tricks that you could give to parents wanting to get their kids interested in reading and writing?
Well, the one thing would tell parents, and I have always told parents, number one, please do not say, well, he doesn't read, just like his daddy doesn't read. No, I don't read. We don't like to read. Well, what you've just done is given your children permission to not read. Okay.
Hmm.
And so when the minute you do that, you wouldn't say to them, well, they don't like to breathe. We're not going to breathe. Or they don't like their
Right.
medicine. We're not going to give them their medicine. Or they don't like their glasses. They're not going to wear their glasses. No, you have to read. You have to, I don't care what your job is. The rest of your life, you're going to have to read. And even if it's just to communicate with other people, understand the world we live in where there's so much false news. If you're not able to read and figure out where the truth is, and that's
Yeah.
hard even today, you're in a
Mhm.
world of hurt. So my first thing is don't do that. Number two would be to fake it till you make it. If you really don't like reading, get a book that you think that you and your child could like. And I don't care. This is what I would tell people. I don't care if it's not fiction. If your son or daughter likes video games, if they like whatever it is, skateboarding, whatever it is that they like, go find, because on today in the world we live in, you can get a book on anything.
Yeah.
Find a book on that and read it. I don't care if you read 2 pages a day. Read 2 pages today, every day this week, 1 or 2 pages. And the next week, read a little bit more and then read a little bit more. And then talk about what you read. Once you read it, put your phone down, put your iPad down, turn your TV off, and talk to each other about what you read.
Mhm.
Ask your child what they think about it. You chose the topic because you think they'll like it.
Mhm.
And that to me, because what you're really building is around that is a relationship to reading that connects you with each other and lets you have a moment with your child that you may not get otherwise.
Yeah.
Because I think too many parents get in the car, and this is the ones that pick their kids up because most kids are on a bus. But at some point in the day, how many parents look at their kids and say, how was your day? And here's what the kid says. Fine. It was fine.
Literally what I used to do. Yeah.
Fine. And what that means is I don't really think you're that interested in me telling you about my day. You've already communicated to me with your actions, your interest, or whatever that fine, non-communication is acceptable to you.
Yeah. Reading and writing, if I got into that earlier, I feel I'd be so much more engaged with the world around me. I have no idea the benefits I would have come out with if I had done that earlier.
I'll even go a step further. If you really all hate reading, buy joke books. Buy a joke book, buy 2 joke books and tell each other jokes that you have to read because you're at least reading something.
Yeah. That's a
Tell
great
each other
tip.
jokes and laugh together.
Mhm.
Because if you do that, it's going to change you. It's going to change your perspective. And here's the thing. I'm so passionate about books. I'm so passionate about growing families and reading because that changes lives.
It so does. I was sharing. I'm like, what? I've really started to feel more engaged with the world around me, and I think it's less because I'm growing up and more because I've been reading and writing about topics and really digging into them. That I'm just getting so much more out of every minute of my life. Um, I have no doubt that this is a top skill or set of skills to be learning.
Can I tell you
What
a funny story?
Definitely.
Okay.
Always open.
So my granddaughter is 8
Mhm.
and she was reading at school. And she will tell me, like, she'll ask me about things that she's been reading about. And so one day she came home and she said, Mimi, what did you think about silver silver rights. And I thought for a minute, and I thought, was she talking about like old people rights, you know? And I said, baby, I don't know anything about silver rights. And she said, Mamie, you don't know anything about silver rights? And I said, no, baby, I don't. She goes, well, let me tell you about it, Mimi. And she begins to tell me all about Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. And I realized she's talking about the 60s in the United States. But because she was reading at school, we got to have this great conversation. And I got to explain to her, it's not silver, it's civil.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But she had a whole conversation on it.
Yes.
It's adorable.
And if I had not done that, because when I pick her up after school, because her mom's an attorney, and I would have said, how was your day? It's fine.
Yeah. Wow. What age is she? And she's having conversation. 8 years old, and she's talking about the civil rights movement. Oh my goodness. She probably knows more than me. Oh my goodness. That's impressive.
Well, she was funny.
Wow. But we were talking about down south, and literally, what you were describing, the picture and the image that you get when reading, I get that. I also get that when reading, but I've very experiential in life, and I get a lot of feelings that come back to me when I travel to other places. One of those is when I traveled down south, and I learned about it when I went to the F1 racing in Texas with my family. Mm-hmm. And right when I got back, I got flashbacks from Disney World, because they have it in Florida. And it's just a completely different feeling from up north and everywhere else that I've been.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just right in the air. And then I obviously fell in love with going down south. So I would drive down there all the time while in school and college. And I basically just drive down as far as I could to California and then come back just for fun. And I could literally smell it through the air when I was driving there. It was like a time zone shift. It was just the best experience ever. What's your favorite part about your hometown or down south that is just not found anywhere else that you've seen?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say, like, my instinct is to say people, but the truth is people are the same everywhere. And maybe it is, especially not just in Searcy, but I think this is a Southern thing, but especially in Searcy, is there's a friendliness. And I also think part of it comes to do with our weather, because it's warm so much of the year. Like, I'm in shorts and a t-shirt today. It's 91 degrees here.
Wow. And it's like -8 here.
Yeah.
Wow.
And, you know, we have snow like maybe a week, and our whole city shuts down. I mean, if it's an inch, we shut down. We celebrate that snow moment, and then we send it on its way. And so I think because it's warm, we all live outside, and we're very outsidey people, and we go outdoors and we sit on our porches and our patios. We all have pools, and people swim, and it's a different lifestyle.
Wow.
And so, like, my house actually sits right on the golf course. So, you know, my husband can play golf every day if he wants to. He just jumps in his golf cart and he goes. My kids grew up that way. And so I think that's part of my little town, is that, you know, we have tennis courts and pickleball courts, and we have pools, and but we have an outdoor lifestyle. Now, I also think that makes us a little loud, because people that are always outside are loud. You can always tell when you have a bunch of Southern Americans together, we are the loudest people in the entire place.
That's the best part, though. It's so lively to be around and so exciting. Wow, that sounds like a fantastic hometown to raise a family in, though. I can't imagine that could be bad for somebody.
I also would say the food. We have great food down here.
Oh, the barbecue. When I haven't been over there, but you know,
have you been to Memphis? Have you had Memphis barbecue?
No, I haven't yet. I know, and I feel guilty for that. I've had Texas barbecue, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is fantastic.
Now, the Texas barbecue is like a country barbecue, but Memphis barbecue is much more like a dry rub, especially the ribs, and it is divine. They have a whole festival the whole month of May It's called Memphis in May. And they put on thousands of barbecue teams come to Memphis to compete. It's incredible.
Oh, cool. Wow. Because Memphis is known for their barbecue, right?
Yes.
That's like you'll see the Memphis barbecue sauce here. So yeah, wow. Well, that sounds so exciting to live down there.
That's where we're from originally. My husband and I both went to, it was Memphis State back then, 100,000 years ago. My diploma says Memphis State, but it's University of Memphis now.
University of Memphis. Well, yeah, the culture for sports in the U.S. in general is very interesting, but when you get down south, it starts to become very interesting with the support for teams and such. But it's so cool. It's so interesting that you said that there's no professional sports in your and wow.
No, and as I said, we're all Razorback fans, and that's football, baseball, basketball, you name it. Track. They're one of the most celebrated track teams in the country. So they enjoy tremendous support financially, as well as just they're incredibly good. They're so good. It's a good school. My kids went there, and my daughter loved it. My son loved it, and I think that's just again. That's the university. Like that's the one,
Mm-hmm. That's really cool though. It's so there's this one university.
Well, no, there's lots of universities, but there's one Razorback.
Oh, okay.
And that's the big Division I school that everybody supports. Now we have ASU and we have Conway, but they're littler. They're small little schools. They're not going to compete because Arkansas has won national football and basketball championships.
Yeah. Wow, so that's the pride in the town. It's such a cute little town that you described. It's fantastic. Wow. But wow. I wish I was around that most days. I'm jealous.
Well, if it was my thing, I would not be there. Oh, I don't know how you stand it.
You were mentioning the warm, and I was just going to mention over here, we have dump trucks that carry the snow out of town to dump into parking lots because they can't even shovel it anywhere. That is how much snow there is on a daily basis here in Ottawa, Canada. And it's freezing. Over there, it's what temperature?
91 degrees today.
Yeah, which is freaking hot. And here
it's a good hot. There's no humidity today. You need to come to Searcy when it's 99 degrees and 100% humidity.
Oh my goodness, that is boiling.
That's July to August.
That is some of the warmest temperature too, right? That is just, oh my goodness. Yeah, here we
just keep going. That's our life.
Yeah, there hasn't been a day here where it's been above zero. So we've been in freezing temperatures. The river here actually freezes and you ice skate on it just to show how cold it is. Solid ice. Yeah, incredible. But
I don't even know if we have. I think we have one, maybe two ice rinks in the whole state of Arkansas.
Yeah. Does anybody play hockey there?
I think they have a little league in Little Rock, not like professional or anything. Now, but they do have an ice rink, and they do have some people that do that there. But when we lived in Texas, I really got into hockey and loved going to see the hockey games.
Yeah,
I could definitely get involved with my.
Yeah, definitely. It's a high. I was just going to say it's a high energy sport, and the fighting is one of the unique things about
people get so intense.
There's no other sport where they fight and it's normal, right? I think that's the only
not that
one.
I know of.
I actually, when I got older, I'm like, this seems, I know this is normal, but I'm like, wow, who started fighting in the sport? And then it just became a norm. Like, it seems so strange outside of all the other sports. But yeah, so as an avid reader, is there any reading that's particularly interesting to you? And what do you read in general? You mentioned there's nothing too much about fantasy.
No, I don't do fantasy. My favorite is historical fiction. I love reading and learning about World War II. That time period is my favorite. And pretty much will read any historical fiction set in that time period. Anywhere from like 1938 to 1945. That is absolutely my favorite time to read. from that, I really like a family drama more than just a traditional romance. I also really love a psychological thriller where the the author has kind of got secrets from us and we have to figure them out. I really like
Oh,
when there's twists and turns and you have to think to figure it out. So those are probably my three favorite. I do read murder. I just don't think there's that many murders in real life. And so,
yeah.
I have friends that's all they read. And I'm like, you kill somebody
Yeah.
every week. I just can't.
Yeah. I saw that. I believe it's called True Crime Podcasts, and
Mhm.
those are just blowing up. And I was like, why
Yes.
does everybody want to hear about this? I'm like, I feel like I've never been interested in that.
Me either, but that would be my favorite is that kind of writing. And I would say also till history. Any historical read, any biographical read, I will just suck those up because I love knowledge. And
Yeah.
I love when I can piece what was going on in the world with what was happening in the world and the way people reacted to it.
Mhm.
So I think
So
that's so
do
telling.
you
And I
like
also
doing
think
a lot
history
of
repeats itself.
background research with your reading then, and you do
Oh
a lot
yeah.
of
Yeah,
thinking around?
absolutely.
Sounds
Absolutely.
like
Because
it.
you have to, because if you don't, your writing won't hold water. It'll have holes and it won't make sense.
Mm.
Because now that's the thing about a futuristic or a science fiction, you don't have to hold water. You can just make it all up because no one knows what the future's going to look like. So there's some authors, preference that you get to have that you don't if you do historical fiction. With historical fiction or history or things that are tied in reality, you have to base it because people can go, oh, that wouldn't happen. That wouldn't happen. That's silly. That they wouldn't do that. And you'll
What
lose your
was that
reader.
concept? Holding water?
Yeah, have you never heard that?
I've never heard that. Describe that really
So,
quick.
it's the idea that if you had a cup and it has a hole in it, it doesn't hold water. So you're not going to have the water very long. So if you want a concept that holds water, it's got to be solid. It's got to have some stability to it.
Interesting. Well, that's a good, interesting place to leave off of. Thank you for sharing your writing, your reading, and an amazing background that just ties in perfectly with being a writer. I don't know if I've heard a story that's been throughout somebody's life that just makes perfect sense to why somebody's reading and writing, and that's a beautiful story. And what a beautiful family, town, supporting each other. What's the best way? It's hard to not take that out of your writing. It's a feeling that's conveyed to the reader. So if you want to get that feeling in the middle of a busy day when you're scrolling through, I would definitely read up on this book. And one more time, if you could describe, describe where
So
people can find you and
this is
your books.
these are anywhere you can find books, but from Barnes and Noble to Amazon. This one is the first one. It's the story where he's the politician who is disgraced. And basically book one is explaining that his why he's running for governor and that he's got to talk these ex-wife and new wife into telling their story. And then that's what happens. Taylor, the ex-wife, tells her story. And then in the part two of this, Ben, his son, kind of does a little overview. And then in part three, the current wife, Poppy, tells her story. So that kind of sets that up. Then in book two, it's a companion piece. Ben, who is his son, this is his story of how he falls in love. And then with his fiancee, Ella, and how they come to Searcy and their choices. And then the new one will be the wrap up of the Dirty Birds book club and how those same women, tell their story. And it all kind of ties together at the end.
Do you have a release date for the new book?
I don't. It's at the editors now. And I have queried a lot of literary agents. And so if there's anybody out there watching, please contact me. I'm looking for one. If I don't get a literary agent, then I will self-publish again. And then it'll probably be out around Memorial Day.
Wow, fantastic. I look forward to that. If you ever want to show back up on the podcast and give a chat about some new writing that you're working on, that you're always welcome. And just one more question. Do characters reappear in your books or in
absolutely.
this series?
Yeah. In all of these books, the characters in this book are in this book. And then in the Dirty Birds, they show back up. Cool. And that's important because the people that are important to your life, they reappear.
Yeah.
And they become kind of like a family, and they are a family. And that's what happens with a family drama, is that each other's muck gets on each other, and we have to figure out how to survive together.
Ah, fantastic. Well, yeah, again, the feeling of the tight knit town with a supportive family right there,
Yep, that's what it is.
Sticking around, and you got to deal with it and right through it. So fantastic. Wow. Thank you so much for coming on today. And
Thank you. It's so nice to meet you.
Yeah, so nice to meet you too. We welcome anytime. And I hope that your next writing project, just it's exciting. I don't know what else to say.
If you get to Arkansas, look us up. We would love to host you and take you to the club and let you see what a Searcy lifestyle is all about.
Definitely. It sounds like there's so many readers and writers out there. I definitely have to show up.